Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This week I'm back with a new hard industrial techno tutorial, this time with Toxic Machinery. You have here the full reference track that I've used for this style. As usual, you can get the project file in the link in the description. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by commenting, liking, subscribing. Here we go. So I'm gonna start with the kick. I've made this kick. So it's a bit of a weird way I did it. I went a little bit crazy in this project, but whatever. I'm just gonna show you how I layer the different channels for my kick. So I first started with this kick group. So sorry, it's a bit heavy in terms of bass frequencies, but you will see after how I will use it. So as usual, I have some group processing on this one, and I'm gonna layer a rumble kick and a kick punch to make that kick group. And this kick group there's a lot of overdrive and saturation and a bit of clipping, of course. So you see this overdrive is really like transforming the whole thing. So I'm gonna keep it and I'm just gonna show you. I've used several samples. So I have my first layer, which is my kick punch, and this is this one. So it's just a Vengeance sample, pretty clean. Here it was a bit too much, and now we have all the samples in this frequency area, so that's why I cut like this. So this is really like the bass, and this is going to be the main punch, and on top of that I'm gonna add different layers with lots of distortion. I have first these kind of top kicks, so That's why I cut like this. I just add back a different top like this. I have another one. Here it's just a gritty industrial layer like this. Together adds a bit of that industrial feeling. And this one is more like a raw grit and industrial layer. And so if you look at it, at first it's like this, and I play with the pitch to create a movement. Of course, I'm not gonna keep that bass. How I do it is that I use the band sidechain here, so that I don't have any bass in the first part of the kick. So this is the punch here. Already have some movement, I have a good punch, and then I'm gonna make a rumble. So for this rumble, I've used, again, lots of processing, but I'm gonna show you first. I've used 2 samples. The first one is an impact. So it's an impact that I pitch down. It's really just to get the bass sound. And I just keep the offbeat, and then I'm gonna distort it a lot to create something very heavy. So I use this amp in mono, I use the overdrive. It really brings that very low end. And then I'm just gonna add another kind of weird rumble sample just to add a bit more movement. So you can say, yeah, this is going to cause some phase issues, but since I'm adding lots of different saturation and I'm clipping after and so on, it's just going to make a big sausage. And its rumble is actually just a phasing noise in the low frequencies. So whatever the different samples, if at the end you EQ properly and you get the bass sound correctly, then it's good. So here I have a kind of movement, I have a kind of reverby sample, and altogether I'm just gonna distort a lot. I'm first using Decapitator to add a slight distortion. Then I'm using an effect track, so this is the dry signal, and then I'm gonna create something more moving with a delay. So I'm distorting the dry signal, I'm sidechaining, I'm putting a delay, and I'm sidechaining again, and this is going to create a different kind of movement. And then I'm only taking the bass sound, I put it mono, and I make sure it's properly sidechained. After that, I have some more distortion, some inflator, and a clipper. So it really creates something more industrial. Altogether, this is this, and then I'm just gonna distort it again with the group processing, and that is lots of overdrive. I'm bringing back lots of high and mids because it was too much in the lows. I'm just clipping at the end, and here I chose to put it in mono, but it depends on what you want to do. Could have worked also, but I'm gonna add back some sides after. So this is the first kick that I made. I recorded it here, so without the auto filter. And I'm just gonna add 2 more top kicks, and there's actually one that I made here. I actually made another kick for this track at first, but I didn't like it, so I just used that sample. It was a kind of kick that I made, and I just took back this to use as a top kick. So how I do this is I take the kickstart, I take only the punch, the rest is gonna go through a sidechain. I keep only the mids and highs, and then I'm just gonna create like a hard punch. And the way you can do this is always the same. It's kind of the hard style method. Is you create some EQ that's gonna create a resonancy, and you're gonna stuff that resonancy with some saturation. and it's gonna feel full. And then I'm just adding this rack that I use often, which is just an industrial rack. And actually there's just a flanger and some reverb here because I put off delay. And it's gonna create even more industrial feeling. So it's really that top punch that I had on top, and I have also just a metal perk. So it's just a perk like this that I put through some heavy saturation and the same rack, which is delay, reverb, and then just EQing and side shading. And all together it creates that kick. I just have last EQ here to balance a bit more and to get back a bit more mid-range, and that's it. That's how I did this kick. Okay, so next I have the noisy background ambience that I'm gonna create, which is very specific to the Toxic Machinery style, especially in that track, Satanic Lust. So how I did this, I use several different samples and layers to create a noisy background. So this is the first group that I made. How I did this is I took a Foley sample, a Foley sound. So you can take any noise, any perk or whatever. You see like this, it's just a kind of sweep. You can take also a tail of an impact, but you're really gonna create something more moving and more in the background thanks to some reverb and to the two main tools that I use a lot and I love about Ableton, which is the grain delay and the shifter. You will see you can just create some very interesting texture just with these tools. So at first, this is the sound that I have. If I add the grain delay, already it's more dark, it's more in the background. I have also a kind of side effect. Then just an EQ. Then I create a long reverb, a long tail. And then you can create even more different texture with the shifter. And I did this like tweaking. You can tweak the grain delay and the shifter until you get something that's dark and industrial enough. And that's exactly how I did this. And then I just sidechain. So this is the first one. For the second one, I think I just duplicate the channel, but I use a different Foley. I can also use the same Foley, but change the pitch. And it's gonna work also. You can try different grain delays, different shifter. You can add 2 grain delays, 2 shifters, whatever. And just here, I'm making a kind of call and answer. So that's why I have this pattern. I have another one. This one is a clap reversed. But again, I'm using that reverb and then grain delay. I have here another one, which is a clap. Again, this time I have a bit more delay. So this is the first group. I have also some other ones. Again, here I'm using a clap that I reverse, and I'm using also that rack, that industrial rack. So delay, reverb. Again, grain delay. You can create even more character with some amp. I have another one here. I don't even know what it is. Maybe it's just Foley or something that I recorded. Again, you can play with the pitch. That's what I did here. Create different tones. And that's pretty much it for the background ambience. After, I'm just adding also a perk loop, which is something that you can find in one of the tracks here. Don't remember which one, but basically it's just something very loopy. That's gonna accompany the kick. That's gonna add a bit more drive to it. And so what I did here is I'm using a perk. I make a pattern with some velocity movement. You can also humanize the MIDI pattern. Then you can play with a different pitch, the transpose. Here I made something very quick with the envelope. So I make it a bit more clicky. So delay reverb, a bit of flanger so that it moves around each time it plays. Again, shifter. It makes it more dark, and then just EQ and cutting that resonancy, and then sidechain. That's how I did this perk. And I have a last one, and this one is more like with some harmonics, which is a background loop. I think it's a perk loop. I've used distortion here, shifter, grain delay, lots of different reverb, delay, and EQs. And at the end, I just tag the different effects until I get something that I like. And here I'm actually creating some harmonics, something resonating with that peak with the EQ. And this one is going to be more distinctive in the ambience background. The other are more noisy, and this one is more with some harmonics. So it's a good way to use it also. And that's pretty much it for the different ambience background. Okay, so next I have my drums. So for the drums, I've used again some kind of noisy drums and some other drums that are more like 909 classic drums. So also I have some perks. So this is a technique that I already showed you before, but this is very useful for industrial techno. So you can take just a random sequencer, Roser, ML sequencer, Snake, whatever, and you're just gonna randomize something in terms of pitch or velocity if you'd like, or octave or whatever, and then you just use this rack. So I actually used perk loop, and then you use the slice mode. That way it's gonna trigger different slices each time it's played by the sequencer, and you can try different combinations, randomize, and then just add lots of distortion, overdrive, amps, pedal, whatever, and you record it. So here I just recorded some parts, which was this one. And then I just EQ'd and sidechain, and this is gonna be something industrial. So that's it for this perk loop. Next, I have some hats and ride. So first I have this ride. So I took a ride sample, and I'm just gonna create a pattern with the volume here. Just changing the volume here in the sample, and it's gonna create something like this. And I'm just sidechaining. I'm adding the shifter. It's gonna completely change the tone again and make it more dark. I have some distortion. I have some reverb, a bit of autopan, and EQ and sidechain. That's how I did this ride. Next, I have my hats. So for the hats, as I was saying, there are two types of hats. I made some noisy ones. Pretty noisy, pretty distorted. And I have some more straightforward hats. So like this open hat and this hi-hat. So if I first look at the noisy hi-hats, I'm creating this with two layers. So I took one sample, this one I took it and kept the whole loop. But again, I'm creating my own sound with lots of effects. So you see at first, it's just a kind of 909 jungle loop or whatever. And I'm creating something very noisy thanks to the amp, which is full on. I actually have two. And again, creating something more dark with the grain delay. It instantly works. And then I'm just sidechaining and adding some very short reverb. Second one here, just a different one. I can also play with the pitch maybe. So here I make it more quick, like more loopy. It's gonna give more drive and it's gonna be quicker with the rhythm of the track. And again, just adding some amp, sidechain EQ, and there you go. And actually, I thought this was the only thing, but after on the group, you can still process it even more. Here's just some EQs, but I've added a shifter, which makes it more pleasing, in my opinion. Again, cutting some frequencies. Usually you have very harsh frequencies at 4K, and especially because of those amps that really amplifies those different resonances. So that's it for this noisy hi-hat. Next I have a noisy open hat. So here, 2 open hat samples. You can take whatever sample you want, but basically here it was really like resonating, just adding lots of reverb. And on this one, I'm creating something with some noise, distortion, reverb, shifter, and so on. And all together again, another shifter to make it more pleasing. And that's how I did this. And finally, my more straightforward hats. So I have this open hat. So 909 sample, just some reverb, 909 sample, well, not 909, but this one is more clicky, just for the transient. And that's it. Here I gained some headroom with that soft clipping. So it's going to be useful in the mixing process. And finally, there's some hi-hats here. I made my own pattern here with some sample that I like. And there's a second one here with a different pattern. Again, lots of different velocity movement, humanization, different samples, and that's how I do it. And that's pretty much it for my drums. Okay, so next I have the different leads that I have for my track. So first is that little FM synth that I use in the intro, and I think that's something you can find in some of the Toxic Machinery tracks. So this is really some FM synths. So I made it in Serum. I'm just using 2 oscillators and one is linked to the other one in FM. So you take FM from BVKER and you're just gonna play here with the fine tuning or the pitch to make it a bit slightly different from the first oscillator. And instantly it's gonna create that FM synth. And I'm also creating different resonances with that flanger filter that you can just move and actually automate if you like. So this is just a sound source. Then of course I'm adding live to it with a reverb like this, bit of distortion, shifter again, because I thought it was better and more dark. Bit of delay and sidechain, yeah, just some EQ and clipping for the mixing again. Also, I made some alternative perk, which is just for you. I didn't use it in the end, but this is something that I found also in the tracks that I have here. And this is a sort of rhythm like this. So how to do this is just use a perk sample, you withdraw the transient, it's gonna sound better, and you loop like a 1 bar loop, and you just put this pattern on the first half. And then you just create that rhythm with some delay. So it's really this delay that's gonna create the rhythm. And then after it's just some reverb, bit of saturation. Also I changed the tone. You can try different pitch. You can also pitch it down or up here to create different tones. And this is how you can make those kind of perk loops underneath your kick. So next I have my first kind of drop where I use a perk like this. So I made this pattern like this, and what I use here is this stab from Serum, but actually it doesn't really matter. I think I tried something different at first, but in the end it's just a sound source, and it's so much distorted that it's gonna create just some noise. And here I'm using the arpeggiator in 16th mode so that it's quicker. So yeah, without it, you can hear the stab sound. I think yeah, that's why I've put a lot of distortion. You have like nasty heavy distortion here, like 100%. Again, you bring it to life with some delay and some reverb, really long, and sidechaining. And the second one, which works like called an answer, is something that I called like a screech. So I've used a pluck, and again, I'm putting so much distortion that it's becoming something more noisy and resonating and almost like a screech. So you see, the first sound was something like this. I think I pitched it down, yeah. I could have used it like this also, but I'm just adding so much distortion like this that it's gonna completely transform it. And then again, putting some delay reverb, sidechain EQ, and this is how you do this. So this is the first call and answer at a drop. And then I'm rigging a saw lead, which is something that I saw in one of the tracks here. I think this is the last one. And I made this little pattern. So you can be off key or whatever, it can work. Since it's industrial techno, the dissonant things could work. So here, this little pattern, it's something pretty loopy, you can see. And I'm only using like a small amount of notes so that it feels darker and more cohesive. So again, I think I'm using a stab here, so without all of the processing, it's something almost like a saw wave. Yeah, it's just two saw waves that are a bit detuned, like different detuned. Some distortion, compression, delay, reverb, like the classic effects, but really like nothing special. Again, I'm gonna bring it to life with more distortion, delay, long reverb, and that pattern that really works. Again, I'm controlling the transient with some clipping here to gain a bit of headroom, because usually you have lots of transient in those plugs. You can also use a compressor, and here I'm also using the OTT, which is really something effective to make strong leads. Gonna really make it more energetic and massive instantly. And that's pretty much it for this saw lead. So I'm adding that lead in the new drop, and then I'm bringing back other stuff and other elements in the parts, the next part of the track. Okay, and finally I have a few effects and some of the elements of my breakdown. So I'm gonna use a few sweeps almost as a leitmotiv here, every like 8 bars, to like mark the different parts of my track. So here it's just a noise, something very simple. I also this other noise here, the intro. I have also here, so at my breakdown, I kind of tell, okay, this is my breakdown with this impact. And then I'm starting building the tension in 2 different parts. So first I use a kind of Atmo like this. So I'm using synths or reverse synths that I've put in the sampler. I'm using the sustain mode like this, so it's gonna be played and go back and forth, so that it's a kind of infinite synth. And then I'm just creating that texture with that 100% long reverb. I boost it a little bit with some distortion. IQ, I just wanted the top part because I have some other frequencies underneath, and I'm bringing it slowly with the auto filter like this. This is this Atmo, and underneath it's more like a noise actually. So I took a perc and again distorting it a lot, and I'm using the grain delay and lots of delay here. It's gonna completely change the sound and make something like very noisy. And and dark. And so both together. This is my first part of the breakdown, and then I'm making a pause to stop to create some tension. And then in the second part, I'm adding a vocal. So I have this vocal with 3 different shots. And I'm actually using it also here for the drop. All of these are separated by some impacts that are also merged with a bass sample that I liked a lot, which is something from Dubstep, I guess. It's a kind of reed bass, but I make it really gritty with this rock mode amp. I sidechain it with the impact, of course. And it's gonna create that nasty moment until the drop. And that's it for this track, guys. So I hope you liked it. Thank you so much for the support. I see you in the next one. Ciao, guys.